Hi, everybody. Good evening. And I'd like to welcome you all to our evening webinar, High Quality Curriculum as a Mechanism for Equity and Student Success. My name is Caroline Reid. I am one of the co-CEOs at Ochre Education, and Ochre are really excited to be partnering with Teach for Australia on this webinar. We're really grateful for you all, in particular, to be making the time to attend tonight at the end of an incredibly busy school year, at a time of the year that I know is where there's lots going on in schools. So yeah, thank you very much for making the time, and we're really excited about the discussion this evening, and we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers that we're keen to bring to you. I'm going to open the event by acknowledging country. I'm joining you today on the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present of this wide land of Australia, their custodianship, their courage and their resilience, and extend that respect to Aboriginal colleagues joining us today. I am really excited to introduce Jared to you. Jared is a lead teacher at Teachwell, and he is also the former head of science at Sealey College in Perth, and is currently on a leave of absence from Sealey, where he remains on the board. Jared is going to take us through this evening's events and lead us through the hour and a half we have together. Just by way of housekeeping, we are recording this event, and it will be made available to everybody on the same link that you came in after the event if you're keen to share with others. Just before I hand over to Jared, I would like to say a couple of words just about Ochre and about Teach for Australia. So here at Ochre, don't know us, we are a new Australian not-for-profit resource hub created by teachers for teachers. And we're working with a community of teachers to develop and support the use of a comprehensive bank of free, quality-assured, curriculum-aligned resources. And they are able to be accessed freely by any teacher in Australia, anywhere. And through providing access to this bank of resources, we are keen to support access to high quality learning everywhere and to close the education disadvantage gap. And if you haven't had a look at our resources, please hop on to our website, which can be easily found, and have a look at the resources that we've got both across primary and across secondary. Teach for Australia, many of you will know, another not-for-profit organisation working to break the cycle of educational inequity in Australia by recruiting and developing high calibre teachers for classrooms where needs are greatest. And TFA programs have now reached 440,000 students plus by bringing more than 1,200 high quality professionals to the classroom and helping schools to strengthen their leadership pipelines. And I'm not sure I mentioned it before, but Jared is also a TFA associate, so can certainly speak more from that perspective as well. So Jared, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce the evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you for that acknowledgement of country as well. Much appreciated. Thank you all for joining us this evening and taking time out of your busy schedules. As I was introduced, I'm a Teach for Australia alumnus, so I started my career as a Teach for Australia associate. So if anyone's joining from that network of people, welcome, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm currently lead teacher at Teachwell, which is an organisation that works with lots of teachers around Australia, and I am currently on leave from Sealey Secondary College, which was one of the schools that was highlighted in Grattan Institute's recent report, which was about ending the lesson lottery and talking about improvement of curriculum. I have the pleasure of hosting this evening. So we've got our keynote speaker, which I'm about to introduce, as well as there'll be some time for questions. And then we will have our panel members. There'll be two joining me on the panel, and then there'll be some time for questions as well. So I would like to introduce our keynote, which is Claire Sealey. She is joining us all the way from the United Kingdom. It's a nice fresh morning where she is, so a bit different to the Perth summer that I'm experiencing this evening. Claire is the head of education improvement at the States of Guernsey in the United Kingdom. She's the former head of St Matthias Primary in Inner London, and then is also the editor of the Research Ed Guide to the Curriculum, which I've had the pleasure of reading. So I'd like to welcome Claire, and while you're listening to her presentation today, which is how can better curriculum drive equity, there is a ask a question function on the bottom of your screen. So feel free to put your questions there, and there'll be time for me to ask some of those questions of Claire after she's finished presenting. So I'd like to hand over to Claire Sealey. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'll move straight on past the initial slide, which you've already know the title. Okay, so this question of how can curriculum design drive equity? But the whole drive for coherent curriculum design is rooted in a desire for social justice. And that's because if you have a coherent curriculum, it can meet the needs of all learners, and in particularly two groups of learners: those whose learning is more school dependent, and I'm going to talk about what that term means, and those with special educational needs, or we call it here SEND, so special educational needs and disabilities. And the idea is if it's good for SEND learners, it's likely to be good for all learners. So let's think about that term, the school dependent learner. So for many reasons, some children are more dependent on school to help them learn the types of knowledge that schools teach them than others. And the whole thrust is we need to plan our curriculum through the lens of these children. There'll be other learners whose learning is quite independent of school and will do well anyway. And maybe they can tolerate a less coherent curriculum because they're getting loads of stuff anyway. But school dependent learners absolutely need a curriculum to be tight and coherent and well sequenced. And I think it's really important when we talk about a school dependent learner to say, none of this is destiny, but if you live in poverty, if your parents and carers are working long hours of employment, if your parents and carers have higher stress levels, which obviously poverty and long hours of employment will contribute to, if you live in overcrowded housing, if you have mental or physical health issues, or your parents or carers do, if your parents or carers have a really negative experience of school themselves, low literacy levels, a smaller vocabulary size. So all of those things, domestic violence, all of those things, any of those things, does not mean, it's not automatic that you will be a school dependent learner, but it is much more likely that you will be a school dependent learner. And it's really not to blame parents and carers for being where they are. If you're in one of those circumstances, you have your own challenges, and, I can salute those people for their resilience. But it does mean that you are more likely to have children who are school dependent. So they're learners whose home circumstances means they have fewer opportunities to acquire the sort of powerful knowledge that helps you interpret the world at home. You might gain other kinds of knowledge, but that sort of powerful knowledge is less likely to be learned at home. So I'm changing slightly tack here, and I'm going to do a sort of personal example of how I used to think when I was a teacher myself, and a head teacher, about curriculum design before I understood the need for coherent curriculum design and particularly its importance for a more school dependent learner. So this is probably, 15 years ago or something. And I had this great idea as a head teacher that we were going to do this sort of research project that was very much geared on students researching stuff for themselves and then reporting it. And that sounded very empowering, that they would, be researching. And we decided, I thought, we're going to do something on sustainability. And this is the Aswan Dam in Egypt, and it's about hydroelectric power. And I thought, it's a green agenda, sustainability. This is really exciting. They'll really like that. They're going to research all about hydroelectric dams. Like, it was a completely miserable failure. So this is what they were going to find about, hydroelectric power, sustainable energy resources, less pollution. Oh, how exciting is that? They hated it. Absolutely hated it. It could not make sense of it at all. So I'd have a real think about why that was. The thing is that what was exciting for me, because I know lots of stuff about that, isn't and wasn't exciting for them. And it's much less exciting if you don't already know about the downsides of other methods of electricity generation. Like if you don't know that the other side things are problematic, it doesn't seem exciting to come up with a new solution because you don't even know it needs a solution. And if you don't know what pollution is, then it becomes even more opaque. And if you just sort of think, well, electricity just sort of happens by magic, just comes out of a wall, you don't understand what it's like, you haven't really thought about what it's like to live without electricity. So if you don't know all of those things, you can't think about them. So if we think about actually that chain that you needed to know, so you needed to know to make it sort of something worth thinking about, you needed to know that electricity is really useful. You knew that electricity has to be generated from other sources of energy. You have to know there's different kinds of energy sources. You have to know that some forms of electrical generation cause a lot of pollution. You need to know that pollution is bad and we should avoid it. You need to know that some forms of generation cause less pollution than others. Hydroelectric generation is one of these. By the way, it involves a dam. Know what a dam is, you need a river. So you need to know all of those things. So it needs to be linked together. You can't just assume that people know that stuff. So I would say that one of the key things that we do in education is we want to build students' thinking power. But let's think, what does building thinking power mean? And it's not something you can just do by doing lots of, hey, if we just do lots of thinking, then people will get better at thinking. It doesn't work that way. So what building thinking power actually means is increasing the amount of stuff in long-term memory. If you want to think about sustainability, you need to know stuff about sustainability. You need to know what the building blocks of that are. We're going to unpack that in a bit. But that is because thinking power is generated by having things in your long-term memory that can be connected together. That's what thinking is, connecting stuff together. So if you want to build thinking power, you need to make sure there are more things to connect with. So the more things you can connect with, the more likely you are to have interesting and creative and critical thinking. So we can think about intelligence and what it means. And this is what the psychologists would tell us, that we have fluid intelligence, and that's the stuff that you're born with. And we also have crystallized intelligence, and that's the stuff that can be nurtured. But let's think about fluid intelligence first. So fluid intelligence, you're born with, it's your genetic endowment, and it's about processing speed, working memory capacity, and raw reasoning power. And to a certain extent, you've got what you've got. There's not a lot you can do to increase it, to make it any better. People have tried. It increases through your childhood into your mid-20s and then slowly declines. So, people like me, I'm pushing 60. I'm well into decline there. Whatever I had, it's well into decline. It does not rely on prior knowledge. It's fixed. So, the nature-nurture debate, it's the nature side of that. And it's not improved through education, which is quite stark. But that's what the research says. So that would seem very bleak if it was not for the fact that we also have crystallized intelligence. And that is the ability to apply stored knowledge. And so because it's the ability to apply stored knowledge, that increases throughout our lives as we know more. So old people like me, that's our get out of jail card. So like our processing speed is declining, but I know more. So it's a trade-off. So I've been alive a long time, so I know lots of stuff. So I'm not completely useless. So it's not fixed. It's the nurture side of the nature-nurture debate. And that's where education can help. This is what we can do. This is the gift we can give to learners. So we can't improve working memory in any generic way that is portable from one area to another. The brain isn't a muscle, and thinking is not a generic skill. Doing lots of thinking in one area doesn't help us think better in another unrelated area. If you are a brilliant historian who knows lots about World War II, that of itself isn't going to help you know about the Napoleonic Wars, to think about the Napoleonic Wars, because you need to know about the Napoleonic Wars in order to think about them. But what we can do is give children lots of background knowledge, which will give them the raw material to reason in complex and creative ways, which is the end game. That's what we want. So these days, there's been, in the last 15 years or so, there's been this revolution in cognitive science, and long-term memory is now viewed as the central dominant structure of human cognition. And what experts do is they rely on sort of these expansive networks of information in their long-term memory. That's what makes them experts. And it's not mental agility or skill, which was what we used to think. They were just, very skillful and thought really well. And yet it's more, but they know loads and loads of stuff, and it's really well organized. So let's go back to that. So we think about going back to our school-dependent learners, they rely on school to a much greater degree than their peers to stock this long-term memory. And that stocking of their long-term memory is what provides them with the raw material of thought, which empowers them to think. This is why it's a social justice issue, to make sure we do this. So let's unpack what sustainability might mean. This is the example I'm going to be using tonight. Okay. So what does sustainability actually mean? There are things we all need to stay alive and healthy. That's sort of 6 or 7 year old level of understanding. And then the next link, because these are all linked together. We need to protect these things and avoid damaging them or wasting them. Some resources, some natural resources are finite. When they're gone, they're gone. That's what finite means. But some are renewable if we plan carefully. So finally, we get to be able to understand sustainability. Sustainability is doing things in a way that ensures that the things humans need are not damaged or wasted and are used wisely. But in order to understand that, you need to know all those other things. And what else do you need to know? So here's a network of possible things. If you were going to think critically about sustainability, you'd need to know about. You need to know about pollution and atmosphere and the carbon cycle and fuels and electricity and energy and water and evaporation and all of those sort of things. But it's more complicated than that. So here's sustainability, but part of that is raw materials. But what do I need to think about if I want to think about raw materials? So let's unpack that. So if I want to know about materials, I need to know about different kinds of materials like wood and metals. And if I know metals, I need to know about conductivity and magnetism, and wood, logging, deforestation, and flammability, rocks and soils, volcanoes, farming tools, all those things. I mean, there could be more things, but this is just, my initial thoughts about materials. What do we need to know? But let's think about farming. Okay, so what do I need to know if I'm thinking about farming? Well, I need to know about the crop is, what different types of crops are. I was teaching in inner city London. They didn't know what a crop was, believe me. They have no idea what wheat was. Soil erosion, what it means for land to be fertile, the factors that influence that, irrigation, what a harvest is. For our inner city London kids, a harvest was a festival. You have harvest festival. Beyond that, not much idea. Peasant, in terms of geography, that understanding, and history, what a peasant farmer was, and so on and so forth. So let's think about soil erosion. So do you see, we're unpacking it and unpacking it and unpacking it. This is nested knowledge. There's knowledge within knowledge within knowledge within knowledge. So soil erosion, if we want to know about soil erosion, we need to know about all these other types of things, root structure, what permeability is, soil composition, the difference between settled people and nomadic people, and how being settled means that you're more likely to cause soil erosion, for example, grazing, goats and sheep and so on and so forth, and how they can lead to soil erosion. So it's complicated stuff. And then we think, evaporation is one of the factors that is affected by soil erosion. And then, what do we need to know about for evaporation? Energy, wind, temperature, particle theory. So there's a whole interconnected web of knowledge that we need in order to think about these issues. And we need to build that over time. And it's not a case you can build it in one lesson or even in 1 year. It's a relay race, and we're passing the baton from 1 year to another year to another year. We need to have this sort of interconnected, coherent curriculum design that's really been thoughtfully thought out. So it's a bit of thoughtfully thought out. Anyway, it's been really well thought out. so that we've thought about what the building blocks are of knowledge and how they build over time. Because we learn by building on what we already know, and children who start with less will find it hard to learn if we assume they have the same knowledge as their peers. They might not know about there's different kinds of soil. They might not know what a crop is. They might not know what a farm is, or they might have a very stereotypical view of a farm has, pigs, chicken, and a sheep. They might not know that there's things like arable farms, for example. So curriculum planning needs to start with that really carefully unpicking of what they need to know in order to understand the things we want to teach them. Deliberately mapping this year on year in it so that they can have this critical thinking. And if we don't do this, we're excluding the learning needs of those who arrive knowing less. If we just assume, oh, everyone's sort of got this. And I'm sure you'll all have your own examples of like, what? They don't know that. Okay. However, this can be perceived by teachers that what you're telling me, that I can't just plan my own stuff, but that's what I like doing. That's why I'm a teacher. That's why I'm a professional. Is this a threat to professional autonomy? So I want to unpack that a bit. So whenever we have this debate, people go from 0 to 100 miles an hour and they go, what? You're taking away my autonomy? You're making me into a robot. And like, there's obviously a scale between every individual teacher in the world having complete autonomy and never having to refer to anything else, to being completely disempowered and complete robot who just delivers a script and is not allowed to think. And probably neither of those poles are completely true, even in the most scripted type of lesson, which is not particularly what I'm advocating. But there's a sliding scale between complete autonomy and being completely robotic. And just because people are saying maybe teachers should have to work together and plan together and have some sort of strictures and controls about what they're teaching, does not mean robot. That's a sliding scale, and we can be somewhere around the middle or maybe slightly more towards this end, but it's not one or the other. It's not. We can have some nuance here between no coherence and complete teacher disempowerment. So I'm going to unpack that word professional. So it talks about professional autonomy. So professional behavior is doing what's best for your students. That's at the heart of being professional, even when, and maybe especially when, it conflicts with what you've previously done or believed. Like I previously believed, but doing this sort of research-led, hey, children, go and research hydroelectric dams was great. And then I realized, do you know what? Actually, that's completely wrong. It's not doing them any favors at all. So sometimes you have to take it on the chin and go, what I was doing before wasn't as good as it could have been. And when you know more, you do better. And that idea of best, what is best for students, exploring what that actually means, and exploring your biases and flaws in received orthodoxy about what being professional means. So we might have been taught that, at the heart of my professionalism is the fact that I'm autonomous. Is that necessarily true? And how autonomous? So when we think about pre-made resources, whether they might be made by teams of teachers working together, or even using teams of teachers working together and designing things, or using a pre-made resource, Ochre, or we have Ochre Academy here, or whoever. We've got various multi-academy trusts, for example, here, groups of schools who have designed resources and share those, sometimes free, sometimes for a charge, with other schools. And is that an abdication of responsibility? Because I know it can feel like that if that's the culture you've been trained in. First of all, a bit of a reality check. So we might say, oh yeah, these teachers are all planning everything from scratch. Actually, most of them aren't. What is actually happening is teachers going, I need to plan this lesson. And then on a Sunday night, they're going, oh crap. And they're going online and they're going, oh, I've got to do this lesson on, I don't know, sustainability, whatever. And they're going online, looking at loads and loads of sites, which are maybe not free. They might be, but they may be not free, but they're certainly not quality assured. And that's what they're doing. So it's not like from deep within them, they're coming up with these beautiful plans. I mean, some might be, but that's what most people are doing. In the UK, for example, I don't know if you have this particular product, but I'm sure you've got your own. There's a private firm called Twinkle that does teacher resources for primary schools. Schools are paying £42 million a year to this company to get some resources that are maybe okay, no quality assurance. So we're saying, oh, these teachers, myth of these teachers, sitting at home, being professional and creating these wonderful lessons. What they're actually doing, lots of them, is surfing the internet to find something that somebody else has done that may be okay, maybe not okay, as opposed to stuff that's been deliberately created through high quality discussion with professionals. Next thing, some teachers love planning. Like I'm one of those teachers. Probably if you're listening to this today, you're one of those teachers that loves planning and loves curriculum. Like, why would you come on an evening when you're really tired near Christmas? You probably love planning. So some of us love it. For me, that was one of the best bits. But for many others, it's a huge burden. And actually, they're quite happy to have somebody else go, hey, this is quite good. And because then they can use that and they can think about how best to teach that material. And even teachers who love planning, if you're a primary teacher, you're teaching lots of subjects. You might love teaching planning your English and your history and whatever, but there might be some subjects you go, yeah, I don't know very much about computing, thank you. So thank you very much. That's great. Thank you, somebody else, for doing that. We had a group of one particular school here who was really determined, as a primary school, really determined that the teachers were going to plan their own stuff. They weren't going to use anything else that was out there. They were going to plan it. That was really important. And sitting with this group of year 2, so that's 6 and 7-year-olds, year 2 teachers, and they had to do something on science. It was forces, and they knew nothing about forces. They were like, I don't know. What's forces? I haven't really got a clue. So what did they do? They went on the internet and they started Googling to find somebody else to teach them about forces. Well, wouldn't it have been better to have something curated and well planned and quality assured that they could use as a starting point? They could still tweak it, but rather than assuming that everyone just knows already all the stuff. So if students are to have this coherent curriculum, which is building from year to year and is exploring and exploiting links that exist between subjects, for example, if you're teaching in science and you're teaching about electricity and circuits, and then in what we call design technology, I don't know what you call it there, but you want them to apply that knowledge, then you want to make sure that's linked so that, they learn about circuits and cells and batteries and whatever, and then they get a chance to apply that and make a torch or whatever it is, or make a steady hands game or whatever it is in DT. You want to link it. You want to know that if they're learning about, I'm going to use a British history example because that's what I know, Victorians, and you're looking at census records to look about population changes and the move from rural to urban, for example, Industrial Revolution. And then you're doing some work in graphs, in maths. Now, why wouldn't you use some interesting material that you'd learned about in history? Like, you want to have those links, but that means we can't have planning in silos. And so actually your responsibility is to collaborate and to be willing to learn from others. And whereas you might be used to like, no, I do my plans and it's my special time and it's my creativity, actually you can still have that sort of creativity and bouncing ideas off each other by planning in a group. It takes some getting used to if you're not used to it, and you have to put your ego aside and go, no, actually the collective is stronger than the individual. And that's because responsibility is about what's best for students, not what we personally might enjoy doing. At the end of the day, it's about what's right for students. And if that means you have to give up on some things, then that's what professional responsibility is. There still is responsibility. So teachers are still responsible for. So you've got, even if you've got this resource that you haven't inputted into and it's come from somewhere else, you're still responsible for understanding the sequence in the resource. You can't just like go, oh, I've got this lesson, turn the door, go and deliver it. You need to have read it, understood it, got onto the skin of it. That's your responsibility. You need to think about what's the prerequisite knowledge underpinning the sequence. Do my students have these? If not, what I'm going to do with it before I start teaching this material? How do I maximize what my students have previously, oh, I've missed out a word, have previously learned. You know, they already know this. I know that I'm teaching, you know, I'm in year 4, and I know that in year 2 they learned such and such. So how am I going to exploit that? Or I'm in year 12. What do they do when they're in year 7? What do they do when they're in year 9? And I know that stuff, and I can build on it and refer to it and weave it through. I'm definitely responsible for planning explanations. So I've got this material I've been given, but I need to customize that for my class, for my classes. Where will I need to slow down or speed up? Which are the particular pinch points where I'll really need to carefully check for understanding? Really make sure that they've got it and they've got it and they've got it. And then if they haven't got it, go back a bit. Who in particular will I need to check understands? What questions will I ask? So there's a lot of work to be done. You've got this resource. There's still a lot of work to be done. You just don't need to think about the what. You need to think about the how. You need to be thinking about, do I need to provide scaffolding? Because, you know, resources sort of usually hits the sort of the middle pitch of your class, and you'll need to scaffold it for some learners, extend it for others. And if you are scaffolding, what's your plan to withdraw scaffolding? Because we know scaffolding goes up, but it's temporary, and then it needs to come down. Then I need to think about, how will I adapt my next lesson based on the successes and challenges of the previous lesson? It's being given a resource or creating a resource with others is not a green light to have what we call a conveyor belt curriculum that just moves on irrespective of the needs of the learners. I mean, the phrase I quite often use is teachers are teachers, not broadcasters. So right now I'm in broadcast mode because I can't see you, and I'm just saying my stuff, and I have no idea if you're understanding it or challenged by it or confused by it, because I'm in broadcast mode. I'm not adapting it as I go. In teaching mode, we're scanning the room the whole time. We're asking questions. We're looking at body language, and then we're flexing in the moment to respond to the data we're getting from all that feedback, and going faster, going slower, explaining more, explaining differently. And then when you've done your unit, thinking afterwards, how will I adapt this whole unit? So having a sort of post-mortem afterwards with colleagues, maybe, how successful was it? What did they learn? We want them to learn these things. Did they? And if they didn't, so next time we teach this unit, how are we going to change it? And then thinking about the how we can interrupt the forgetting process. So accepting that forgetting is normal and natural and inevitable. It's not something students do to wind us up. It's just a natural part of being human, is that we forget stuff. We all forget stuff. And so how can we interrupt that natural forgetting process by planning deliberate retrieval activities a month hence, 2 months hence, a year hence, so on and so forth. So we have all of those responsibilities. So the fact that the initial starting point, the initial plan might be something that you didn't do by yourself, you might have done with colleagues, or you might have got from somewhere else, does not mean you've got no autonomy or responsibility. You have absolutely, it's just channeling your energies better into how you're going to nuance and deliver that resource, rather than thinking, what do I actually have to teach them in the first place? So there we are. That's the end of that part. So I'll now minimize it. So now I'll be able to see people, which is nice.
Thank you so much, Claire. We've had lots and lots of questions thrown into the chat. So we'll kick it off with some of those questions. So the first question is from Reed. It says, Claire, we don't have unlimited time in our classes. How do we make decisions about what we should teach in our classrooms?
Yeah, well, this is why I think the power of doing things collaboratively is more important, because you can sense check where you're going with other colleagues rather than just being down to yourself all the time. So you do, and I think the hardest bit of curriculum planning, the hardest bit is saying no, because there's so many wonderful things you want to teach, you know, and if you're really like somebody who's really excited about a topic and like, I don't know, here we study World War II is a big thing to study, and it's like, but we could do this, and 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 like I remember my adult son is really World War II buff, and I was saying, well, we can't do the Eastern Front, we can only do the Western Front. It's like, what? It's like, no, we can't. I'm sorry, and then we can't even do other countries. We just got to do basically the UK and the impact there. That's all we can do. And it's like, no, but you have to hone it down, and rather than do a sort of scattergun approach where everything is an inch deep and a mile wide. In curriculum planning, there's always a trade-off between breadth and depth. And if you do too much breadth, it's at the expense of depth, and you never get really good at knowing something. So you want a bit of depth, but obviously you don't want so much depth that there isn't any breadth. You don't want to just do World War II in history and never do anything else.
Yes.
But that's the trade-off.
Yeah, and I think that breadth and depth debate is great to hear your perspectives on that, as well as I heard your examples of electricity and a few other ones. I'm a science teacher, so hearing from the physicist in my team and what's important compared to what's important from my perspective as a biologist, it's good to have that discussion and make decisions collaboratively.
Yeah,
that.
And I don't know if you might have noticed as a science teacher, but like I was really careful in that, because I've had science teachers going, "Don't say make electricity, because you can't make energy. Don't say make energy." So like really careful with my language about we're not making, we're generating, those sort of things. So it's really useful to work with colleagues who are specialists, who can alert you to, no, you're just giving them misconceptions there.
Yeah. Another question is from Vardis. It says, what's your advice for doing this at a secondary school level where we have more discrete subjects? And he elaborated, or they elaborated, apologies, more that it is trickier or more separate than in a primary school where one teacher teaches a class for most of the week. And that's slightly more challenging when you're aiming for a coherent curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was in secondary school, I would start off like, it's great in the longer term to get, your science and your maths department collaborating, but that's a longer term thing. In the beginning, I think it's about having coherence within a subject. And so getting your science teachers working together, getting your history teachers working together. So I think that's where it starts. But there are some quick wins between subjects like maths and science. Just decide what you're going to say about graphs, for example, and the terms you're going to use, and equations. And, there's some simple things that you both do, and just check on that, and also like check the sequence of it. So if the physicists are saying, oh, we're going to do this and it involves rearranging an equation, or maybe wait until they've done that in maths, or say to the maths people, could you do that a bit earlier? So there are some quick wins. But in a secondary school, I think definitely it's fine to start off, spend a couple of years just doing it within a subject. It takes a long time to do this stuff. It's no quick fix. It's not like, oh, we'll put it on our development plan and, for the first 6 weeks. So this is forever. You'll be doing this. This is a forever thing. And, we took in the school I was head at 3 years maybe before I thought, yeah, okay, we're getting there now.
Another question is, what do you advise if someone's leading a team where time is scarce and not allocated to the task of shared planning? Any advice about what we can say to persuade teams to take that time to plan together? I
mean, like curriculum planning is massively time consuming. Like it is not a quick fix, and it really, it needs to be a senior leader level allocation of resources to do that. And if that isn't happening, it isn't happening. But there's a moral argument, which I hope I've made. There's a moral argument to do this, in that if we're going to meet the needs of our school dependent learners, we need to do this. It's not good enough for them to just have sort of an incoherent, nice, I'm sure it's nice and I'm sure it's interesting curriculum, but it's a series of one-offs. It's a bit disjointed. That's not good enough.
Yeah, that moral purpose for those school dependent students. And this last question, just because we're running out of time, but it says, is it students who start with less or students who start with different knowledge. What advice do you have around planning a coherent curriculum around the knowledge our students from diverse backgrounds bring with them? So rather than, I suppose, knowledge like school-dependent students, but students that have, I suppose, diverse knowledges.
Yeah. And I think there's both. And I think that's important, not to other, like a school-dependent learner. Like, there's a whole range within that. And it may be that they come with great funds of knowledge from their background, but there'll be some that don't. I mean, let's be honest. There'll be some that do and have incredibly rich knowledge about other things. And there'll be some that really genuinely don't have very much because the challenges of their background are quite extreme. So we need to think about those extreme students first, but also, like, I mean, it shouldn't assume that some people come with nothing, and they may have, like, for example, I know in a inner city England context, like, some of our kids from their religious backgrounds know incredible amounts of stuff, or have cultures that are very rich in poetry, or so on and so forth. So we do need to give children credit and find out some of what they already know. But also, it's about a commonality in a curriculum, and that's where we need to have discussions about where are we taking them, where are we going to get to, and we can't riff off absolutely everything that in a diverse classroom that kids might know, but we can honor that and respect that, and not assume. I mean, that's when you talk about school dependent learners, you have to be nuanced about it. It's not inevitable. They're not a uniform group, and there'll be all sorts of differences and strengths within that. But schools offer what Michael Young calls powerful knowledge, and that's not to disrespect local knowledge and community knowledge. It's just different, and it's a different way of interpreting the world.
Yeah. I loved your take on powerful knowledge in the research ed guides, because I remember reading about that, and yeah, it really helped me understand the curriculum in a different light. So I would just like to say thank you for your time this morning for you. We really appreciate getting your insight into equity in terms of the curriculum. There's always a hot topic, so we really appreciate your time with us.
Okay, well, thanks for asking me, and have a good rest of session, and have a good summer holiday. So weird, isn't it? Summer holiday when it comes.
Yes.
And happy Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Goodbye.
We're now going to move on to the panel section of the agenda tonight. I'm going to introduce the two panel members. They're about to jump on and join me. The first panel member that's going to be joining us is Patrick Ellis. Now, Patrick is the Education Lead at Catholic Education of the Archdiocese of Canberra and Goulburn. I'm just going to say CECG because that's a mouthful. Patrick is leading the implementation of CECG's Catalyst project, which is the evidence-based teaching and learning approach that CECG uses. It includes a strong focus on high-quality curriculum and assessment to transform students' lives through learning. The other panel member we have is Beck Winning. Now, Beck Winning is a teacher at Serpentine Primary School. I have the pleasure of working with some of her colleagues. A small government school that serves a lower socioeconomic community about an hour's drive from Perth in the south, which has successfully implemented a whole school curriculum approach and instructional model. I will pass to Patrick for an opening statement before we get on to some questions. If you do have some questions, feel free to put them in the bottom for us as we do our opening statements. So I'll pass on to Patrick.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry, I had a bit of echo there. Yeah, you can hear me okay? Great. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity tonight to come along and to talk. And it's great to see so many people in the online and so many familiar names, which is great. So yes, as Jared mentioned, I'm education lead at Catholic Education Camp at Goulburn, tasked with leading the Catalyst project. And so for us, the Catalyst project is our approach to professional learning, supporting our schools with teaching and learning, focusing on pedagogy, curriculum and assessment. So really drilling down into how we teach, what we teach, and how do we know what we've taught students have learnt. So for context, we have 56 schools across ACT in New South Wales, ranging from a very small school up to large secondary colleges. And so part of our focus within Catalyst is focusing on the science of learning and the science of reading and what that means for our practice. So that theory of change within Catalyst is a focus on the teacher, and the teacher being the most important learner in our system. And so from that, what does that mean moving forward in pedagogy, curriculum and assessment? We know, and we've heard from Claire this evening, but that quality curriculum has a positive impact on student learning and improves equity across schools. And so that's a focus for us. What we teach matters every day, but it should not be left alone to teachers alone to do the heavy lifting, or schools in our case to do the heavy lifting to translate what they're learning in that knowledge piece of science of learning, science of reading, what that means for their classroom practice. Some teachers, as Claire mentioned, love it and love curriculum development, and that's their thing, and others really struggle with that, and the workload is a significant issue to be addressed for systems, but for school leaders as well. So through what we're doing in Catalyst, supporting teachers with how to teach, it's now opened up the opportunity for us to have serious reflections on what we teach, a conversation that we probably couldn't have had 2 years ago in our system. And so it's an opportunity for us now to really look into ensuring that we have the best quality curriculum, one that's high in ambition, low in variation and knowledge rich. And that's the journey that we're on at CECG, and happy to unpack further tonight and hear from others.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I have the absolute pleasure of working with Patrick as part of the Catalyst project through my work with Teach Well. So it's good to see a familiar face again. I will pass to Beck from Serpentine Primary School for an opening statement.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here. So as Jared said, I am working at Serpentine Primary School. So I'm a junior primary teacher, and I'm also the English coach at the school. Jared's already introduced the school, but so we're a semi-rural school in Western Australia. We've got approximately 200 students. I have been working at Serpentine. This is my second year at Serpentine, and they have been on a school improvement journey since 2017. So they're well into their journey of aligning or improving practice, essentially, and improving academic results. I have been on a journey of aligning my teaching practice with the science of learning for about 3 years. So it was a real privilege to come to Serpentine, who are already so far along in their journey. So as a teacher, my role is really about creating and then implementing resources in line with our low variance curriculums and our scope and sequences that we have as a whole school. And then as a coach, my role is to support teachers and provide space and structure for reflection, the reflection that is necessary for learning and growth. And that's part of our school improvement cycle, instructional coaching, and it's about helping teachers to sustain their commitment towards student-centred goals. That's what my role is within the school there.
Thank you so much, Beck. I come from Averley Secondary College, so hearing your journey from 2017, I was a Teach for Australia associate at Averley Secondary College when we started our journey as a new school, and it was a new school in outer metro Perth, around about 40 minutes northeast. It was quite an interesting journey to start it from the very beginning. So it was less of a change management, I suppose, process, but more of a how are we going to start this right, and our school leaders really really focused on the current research at the time and really wanted to have an evidence-based framework for everything that we did. And part of that was implementing a shared and low variance curriculum, and also driving that high quality teaching for a low socioeconomic status community. So that's always a challenge. So that's my background, and I'll be joining with Patrick and Beck tonight to answer some of the questions. So what I'll do is I'll post some questions. I'll pass to either Patrick or Beck. We'll kind of bounce it around a bit and give the other one an opportunity to answer as well. The first question is, what does support for high quality curriculum look for you in your school system? So I'll pass to Beck. The question is, what does support for high quality curriculum look like for you?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things it looks like. As Claire mentioned, where possible, shared planning is a huge support. You know, at Serpentine, we're a single stream school, so that's not always possible. And I'm very aware that that's not always possible. It can be really difficult. But where you can, being able to collaborate within your year groups and even then beyond your year group is really important. I've been really privileged this year to actually partner with another school because we are so small. It helps to be able to do that. So we're partnering with another school to develop our knowledge units at the moment, which has been a great support, not just for developing high quality curriculum, but then for reducing workload as well. And then I think having those those low variance curriculums and scope and sequences ready to go makes a big difference in terms of support for teachers. And access to high quality evidence aligned resources and materials. There's a lot of resources out there, but making sure that they're high quality and evidence aligned can be really difficult. And I think more recently, there are a lot of resources available. So, you know, I'm thinking Ochre and Read to Learn and the Syntax Morphology Project. There's so many amazing resources. So that adds that extra level of support there as well. And then PL for shared language. We've done all of our teachers at our school do Teach Well, which really helps in terms of shared language for engagement norms and expectations and things like that. And then in terms of support, you know, as at a school level, it's amazing, but then at a personal level to be able to access PL as well in terms of resources like Think Forward Educators and the Reading Science in Schools Facebook page. There's a lot of support available there in terms of PL. I find that's incredibly supportive there.
Thank you for sharing. And really, it does bring up what something that Claire said, which was having that quality assurance around the resources that we're using is just so important. And you spoke about lots of evidence-based resources that your school uses, and it's so important that we use those evidence-based resources rather than ones that might not have that quality assurance. So thank you for sharing. I'll pass to Patrick on what does high quality curriculum look like for the system that you work within.
Yeah, and my apologies, but I think it might just be me in the green room, but I couldn't hear Beck. But so I apologise if I'm repeating anything. But yes, look, for us in a system, and Claire talked a lot about it, a lot of threads that came through, but it is about that common approach, and it's really looking at for us building the collective knowledge first as a system, as to why we need to look at what we're teaching. As I said earlier, that a couple of years ago we wouldn't have been able to have that conversation, and what we teach and how we taught was really tied to teacher autonomy and teacher their own sense of identity. And so building that knowledge across our system and looking at what the evidence says, what the research is saying, particularly in the science of learning and the science of reading, and really connecting with experts and collaborators to help build our knowledge as well as a system, then enabled us to support our leaders to begin to ask those questions as well, and to look at what existing programs are there, and to do the deep dive into what's there, and what could help to support us in that curriculum development, and then look at where the gaps are, and for us, what heavy lifting we could do in terms of that scope and sequencing, for instance, and could we do that as a system to support schools so they don't have to move into that, so that the curriculum development and planning that they're doing is drilled down into the class, into the level of the lesson, and responding based on what's occurring in their classroom on any given day. So sort of different layers for us at a system level, and then school level and the class level, and just looking at how we can support in 56 different contexts and different journeys within their own curriculum knowledge and their own curriculum development and implementation.
Thanks for sharing, Patrick. It's such a different perspective that you share compared to, I suppose, myself and Beck coming from a one single school system. You're working with lots and lots. The next question is, what are some of the barriers to this? So what are some of the barriers, and how have you navigated to produce a high quality curriculum in your context? So we'll start this time with Patrick again. Sorry to throw it right back to you. But what were some of the barriers, I suppose, at the system level?
Yes, for a system level, and I suppose I reflect. I was a principal prior to this, and reflecting at a school level also. But there's different levels of knowledge and different understanding across of why what we teach. We teach the Australian curriculum, or we teach the New South Wales syllabus, instead of actually having those critical reflections as, yes, that is there, but can we raise the bar within that? Am I responding to what students are presenting in my classroom regarding curriculum? What is the ambition that we hold? And so for us, that was 56 different schools and their level of knowledge. So that was a barrier that occurred quite early. It was mentioned before, and Claire sort of talked about that as well around the time, and that was a barrier as well. How can we possibly do this? And I've spent so long. I've developed these units, and I always do these units, or this lesson always follows this lesson when I've done it before. So there was a whole piece of really that collective shared knowledge is really critical in the early days to be able to open up those conversations, to critically reflect on what we have been teaching, and perhaps it is just something that was nice to teach, but not critical to teach, and utilising data and thinking about your school and what the students had learnt previously. We had our scope and sequences generally across the board weren't coherent. They weren't building upon knowledge. They were in isolation. In many cases, teachers were teaching perhaps the same piece of content year after year, and not being aware that had already occurred the year before. So there was lots for us to unpack. So we had to do that. We had to do some learning as well to see where schools are. And if I was in a school, I would do the same thing with teachers to really to build that knowledge and to build an understanding of what the current state is. Are we going to twinkle for our resources? Are we going to pay teachers for our curriculum resourcing? And if we are, then let's stop and critically reflect upon that. And if that's the best thing for our students, and that's ultimately what we want.
Thanks for sharing. And then I suppose what sort of barriers have you faced then, Beck, in I suppose Serpentine in a single stream school? It'd be quite different, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think very different, but also the same in a lot of ways. So time is always going to be a factor. Whether you're developing or finding resources, it takes a huge amount of time to do, and it can it can feel really overwhelming to be doing that, especially the development of resources. You know that the purpose, you know that it's for a good, you know, the outcome will be good, and you know that, but the actual work, the time that it takes can be huge. And then I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the barriers for at Serpentine is just we can't share between our year groups. We're single stream, so we don't have that opportunity to be able to. Our scope and sequence is a little bit different because we're not sharing within year groups. And then I think just personally for me as a teacher, one of the biggest barriers was I think as teachers we give our heart and soul into what we're doing, but it was acknowledging that the way that I was teaching before wasn't what was best for the students. And so having to acknowledge that and shift my thinking and what I was doing and acknowledge that I probably I'd done the best with what I had, but I hadn't given the students everything that they needed, and being able to shift my practice accordingly. That was a barrier for me because having to acknowledge that is a really tricky thing.
That humility, I think, as teachers, when we're building something and putting our heart and soul into a resource or a lesson, and that, you know, I worked on this late at night or sacrificed some sort of part of my personal life to put something together, and then to sideline that and make the decision, oh, is this what's best for my students, is a very tough thing that when you're building a shared curriculum can be a challenge. The next question that I want to jump to is actually from I think we didn't have time for it, with Claire, and it's, do you find more experienced teachers more resistant? And this was posed by Rebecca, and it's asking, as a leader of teachers. I'm going to jump into this one. I've seen it's not necessarily the more experienced teachers either. I haven't. I've seen kind of a mixed bag across the board. I think yes, there's probably lots and lots of resources that a more experienced teacher has probably invested in and put time and effort into. So that can be a harder ask to have that humility to kind of set it aside and see what the benefits are for their students. I think that's a harder ask. So, but I've definitely seen some more experienced teachers that have been teaching for, you know, decades change their practice and make leaps and bounds, and that's through some of the work that I've done with Teachwell, but also being in a new school when we would have teachers that would come to Averley Secondary College and learn how we're teaching after years of previous practice, kind of take to it really, really well. So I've kind of seen both things, but I'm interested to see whether you both have other perspectives. So I'll pass back to Patrick, whether that's something that you've faced.
Yeah, I think it's similar to yourself, Jared. I've seen the work that we're doing within Catalyst. You know, some amazing early career teachers who have just grabbed it, the learning, and off they go. And there's a hunger there, a desire really for more, and to that just give me more, and so I can focus on being the best teacher I can and responding to student needs in the classroom and building that relationship. So, early career teachers seem to be right across this, but our more experienced teachers are very much also, and they bring such expertise and such, a depth in content knowledge that can really strengthen the work that we're doing across our system. And yes, they might have had more time to and more time and investment in previous curriculum documents, but from the work that we're doing, more and more teachers and more experienced teachers are saying to us, this is the way that we should be teaching, and this is what we should be doing, and this is the approach we should be taking. But I think it again comes back to really just building that awareness, or sort of the understanding of the awareness for the need to change and to build that knowledge across the system, and that as leaders, we don't necessarily have all the answers or get it right all the time. So let's do it together, and let's find out, let's read this piece of research, or let's read this article, or let's visit that school, or let's, attend a webinar like this, and let's reflect on that, and let's have a conversation about what that means our practice. And I think that's for more experienced teachers, that's where they connect as well, because they've been in the game for a long time, and teaching is about learning. And when we know more, and when you know better, you do better. So it's really just continuing the conversation. So I haven't found necessarily any resistance is from more experienced teachers versus less experienced teachers.
Thank you for sharing. And then I suppose, from your perspective, Beck, what have you experienced at Serpentine?
Yeah, I think you two have summed it up really well there. I don't know if there's much I can add there. I think, it's not. I wouldn't say it's as much about experienced teachers being resistant. I think it's more about being open, like when the teachers are open and ready to learn, and that's when we find that change. People are ready for change.
Yeah, thank you. And some of the teachers that I've seen who are very experienced and start making changes to their practice after a significant period of time. And some of those are data sources that have supported that change. So they've started seeing the work that they've been putting in affect their student learning and improve student outcomes, and that's been the selling point for them. So highlighting at any point where that occurs is so important. Moving, I suppose, pivoting on what Patrick spoke about, I suppose someone new to teaching really grasping it at some of these new, I suppose, high impact strategies or evidence-based strategies. We have a question that was put in the chat, which is Teach for Australia. Our teachers go into a myriad of schools and community contexts. Too often, there is no shared curriculum. What advice do you have for a teacher, as opposed to a school, for how to best access or build coherence in their curriculum when the wider momentum isn't yet there within the school? So I like to describe teachers like I was one myself. I was often described as a keen bean. I was a keen bean in a school. And any advice for a Teach for Australia associate, someone brand new to being an educator, and what we could do to help support them. We'll go back to Beck, if that's okay. Beck, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think that's the first thing, is just acknowledging that when you're on your own and you're wanting change, but you're the driver and you're trying to do that in your own classroom, that it is really difficult. I think my best advice is to find as many high quality resources as you can and use those. And start with one thing and focus on that. And then, just try and tap into as many high quality resources as you can, because otherwise it's just a huge workload, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed in that sense. But stick with it. And try and tap into as many resources as you can there.
Any advice to an organisation, Beck, that's supporting that teacher? So if there's an organisation supporting them, like Teach for Australia supports their new teachers, what advice would you have to that, I suppose, outside person that's supporting that teacher in that school environment?
Good question.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, look, go to Patrick, come back to me.
Yeah, of course. So, Patrick, what advice would you have to a teacher that's, I suppose, trying to build coherence in their curriculum when the wider momentum isn't there in the school? And then what advice would you have for, let's say, Teach for Australia that's supporting that teacher as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for a new teacher, or going into a school, I think you have to have, it's the reality, I suppose. You have to be sort of aware of the current state, and I would suggest looking at where you can have influence, and to start really small with that. In a previous life, that's what I had to do, and it was really just doing my homework and research, and then presenting to to leaders or my principal at the time about, I'd really like to try this in my classroom, and there was a certain program at the time, and but I had done a bit of work in that to be able to present that and in a good light, and then that started like a small step, and then others wanted to know more, and then I could share more, and then that came to a staff meeting that then I could share at a staff meeting, and there was early success with that. So of course then that's what we all want, and so then everyone was asking more and more questions, and I think just we're so lucky now to have just sort of this ecosystem that's surrounding us, and I would encourage any new teacher to really connect, and via social media is an easy way to connect with people, like-minded people, and we're all so generous with our time, the limited time that we have as educators, but to make sure that we can connect and pay it forward and support. So I would say start small, see where you can have the influence, and then connect with others. Whatever you can do in the reading space is always going to be a great place to start. But yeah, you have to work within the environment that you are. So I wouldn't go full steam ahead as a new teacher, but look where you can have that influence.
Yeah, a lot of what you said kind of echoes when I was in a new school environment as a Teach for Australia associate, and in a school where I wanted to go. Let's do this. Let's climb mountains. It's about building that momentum, and I chose my moments carefully and really connected with other like-minded people, and kind of push that first little domino and see what happens, and then just kind of get bigger and build that with time. And it is that consistent effort over terms and years, which is the challenge. But I relished that in a new school environment. But a big thing for me was having like-minded people to talk through what options I had, and how do I create change in a school system as a new educator? How do I suppose sell something to my colleagues and my school to really take on board that I can see that is going to create change? It's about those small moments that can create momentum. Well, thank you both so much. The next question I have is, what are the particular benefits of a low variance curriculum, a coherent curriculum for a new teacher? So what are the benefits of that? So have you, in your experience working with either the system or the school that you're working within, has there been benefits for a new teacher entering a system where this is in place? So I'll pass to Beck, and if you want to add anything on to the last question, feel free. But what are the benefits to new teachers with a coherent curriculum?
So I think being a graduate teacher, being in a new school, it can be really overwhelming. There are so many things to learn, and you don't know what you don't know. And so it helps just give you the space to be able to work out how to teach rather than the what to teach. The what to teach, you don't need to worry about that. The how to teach, the instructional routines, that can be your focus. It also then gives you time to be able to learn policies and procedures and things with the school without having to worry about trying to organize your curriculum and how it's going to work and what it's going to look like, because it's there. It's based on someone else has done that, and they've done that. It's been purposely designed to best suit the students. And so it takes that pressure off in terms of what you have to plan, and means that you have the freedom to just think about how to teach things.
Hey, thanks for sharing. I echo that completely. I've had fresh graduate teachers and Teach for Australia associates that would join my team, and by having a coherent curriculum, it takes the pressure off. They can focus on behavior management. They can focus on how they create autonomy within that coherent curriculum, and they can focus on what kind of teacher do I want to be, and what's my teacher persona going to be like, and that just provided them, I suppose, with more cognitive ability to do that while they're balancing that cognitive overload of teaching for the first time and responding in that classroom environment. I'll throw to Patrick for this one. So what are the benefits of having a coherent curriculum for new teachers?
Yeah, you guys have pretty much covered, but yeah, it is. Look, it does. It allows the opportunity for those new teachers to focus on the relational aspect of why we become a teacher. To connect with kids and make a difference. And I think that is hugely beneficial early on in a new school environment. I think it provides an opportunity for teachers to share good practice. So as a new teacher coming straight into a school, to be able to then connect straight away with other teachers. The work that the Grattan Institute have done around, looking into teacher workload and, reducing that workload and shared common units and assessment materials, that just takes a whole lot of pressure off a new teacher if we can get that right. And then, really allows that opportunity for focusing on instruction and building that real, as a new teacher to a school, then to really fit into the instructional culture, I suppose, of that school as quickly as possible, without having to focus on necessarily sort of the curriculum and having to plan lessons and scope and sequences and whatever else that you might have to do. So just to be able to walk into that, to focus on instruction and focus on relationships is hugely beneficial, I think.
Thank you so much. This next little section, that's we're going to have one more question, but before we do, we're just going to enable the chat, and there's going to be a survey link thrown in there for people to fill out. Whether they want to fill it out now or when at the end of the session, then that's fine. While that's there, the closing question, and today is about equity and what are the benefits of having a coherent curriculum or a low variance curriculum for our most school dependent, which is the term that Claire spoke about, but also our disadvantaged students. So students facing disadvantage, what are the benefits of having a low variance curriculum or a coherent curriculum for those types of students? I'll pass to Beck first, if that's okay. I'll pass off to Beck. Thank you.
I think often disadvantaged students, they're only exposed to content that is considered kind of at their level. And so this is especially for disadvantaged students who are below grade level. They're exposed to, they often may never be exposed to grade level content. So with our differentiation, often it's, I'm thinking in terms of reading. I know when I was, those students would just be doing decodable readers, and they would never have access to the to grade level content. And that would mean that the complex text that helped build that deep background knowledge just they weren't having opportunity to engage with that. So it allows for all students to access the same content, and it means that all students are given the same opportunity to engage in their learning, and ensuring then that we differentiate by task and expectation rather than content is always going to benefit our most disadvantaged students.
Thank you so much. I echo that. I definitely, from an Averley Secondary College perspective, definitely saw that, and that by having that set coherent curriculum that takes away what's going into our curriculum, but then the teachers can focus on the how in the classroom, and how can this grade level content, how can I differentiate it for my students? And rather than, I often see this debate between, curriculum modification versus differentiation, and do we change the curriculum because, they're not where they need to be in terms of their understanding or their level that they're demonstrating in assessments, but by still keeping it at grade level, just doing it in that way. So thank you for sharing, Beck. I'll pass to Patrick. What are the benefits for disadvantaged students?
Yeah, I think massive, really. And Claire summed that up beautifully in her presentation. But just, for that's that's our role as a teacher, to make sure that every student in front of us has access to the same content, and to content that is rich, and content and knowledge, and building that knowledge. And I'm reminded of Wexler, and like Velcro, and knowledge sticks to knowledge, and that's really important for us as teachers. That's what we want. We want teachers, for the moment of time that we have those students for, to ensure that they gain what they need, that they might not be getting from home. And if they are getting from home, that we can enhance that even more at school, for them to be able to continue to build those knowledge and skills throughout their schooling. And I think that, and everyone's touched on it, but just in terms of the having a really coherent curriculum frees up that time for a teacher to be able to focus on their instruction, which means they're more effective and more efficient to be able to respond to student needs as they present, instead of trying to worry about 30 different curriculums that are occurring in their classroom at any given time, or that they're up all night trying to work out what the next piece of content is, or doing their own research in something that they've that if it's quite solid, and we've got a coherent curriculum that is high ambition, low variation, knowledge rich, that we've done the heavy lifting as much as we can as a school to ease that for a teacher. I think that allows them to connect with every single student in that classroom more effectively than we've done before.
Thank you so much. We just really have closing remarks. So if there's anything more, either of both Patrick or Beck, if there's something that you'd like to share before we close this out, I'll just remind people that there's a survey link in the chat for you to fill out after this. But any closing remarks from you, Beck or Patrick?
I'm happy to jump in, unless Beck, I can jump in first. Just look to say, thank you for coming this afternoon tonight to have this conversation. And I mentioned earlier, it is really important to surround yourself with people and like-minded people, and to support you on this journey if you are doing it by yourself in a school, or you're lucky enough to be a part of a school community that are all on the same boat, or hopefully for us in a system. But it is about connecting and collaborating with each other. We haven't got everything right, but we're willing to learn and willing to work with everybody. So please reach out if there's something that we can do at Canberra Goulburn to support you and your school on your journey. Just reach out. We do have a website that you can find out more about Catalyst if you would like, and there's resources and different keynotes there that are shared as well, just to build all of our collective knowledge. But please just reach out, and we're all in this together.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And Beck, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just to say thanks for having me, and just how exciting it is to have so many people, interested and passionate and thinking about how to, incorporate high quality instruction and high quality curriculum into schools is such an exciting thing to be part of.
Thank you both so much. I think Serpentine's Twitter this evening and the last day has been going off with what they've been posting, and a lot of it is just freely available resources to help people. So, so I'd like to put that out there. Twitter's going nuts for both Catalyst and Serpentine Primary at the moment. And I would just like to thank Ochre Education, who are really trying to build high quality resources and curriculum for all teachers across Australia that are Australia aligned. So that's the important work that needs to happen, as well as Teach for Australia, who supported me in my educator journey, but also the work they've been doing in lots of different systems across Australia in trying to create positive change for students and break through that educational inequity that we have. I would like to thank you all for joining us, and just a last reminder for the survey. I would also like to thank Claire for her keynote, as well as Patrick Ellis and Beck Winning for joining us on the panel. And I just can see that Ochre's thanking us for the generosity in sharing tonight, so I'd like to pass that on too. And yeah. Back to work for all of us, with lots and lots and lots to do as we build educational equity for all of our students. So thank you very much.